Hello, everyone. Anyways, week 12, second to last week of the course. Next week will be our final week. There's a couple of days after that just to kind of wrap things up that I think I just always leave on there just in case something goes wrong. But anyways, so week 12, you're finishing up your peer reviews. That's the most important thing to get done this week. Also finishing up any tests you might be working on, right, that you need to finish up in order to get your certificates. And those are the big goals for this week. So we're kind of getting to the end of the course, and it's been a great pleasure to have you all. I did make a brief announcement in the email for those who didn't see it. If you get a chance and you post your model on either OpenABM or Modeling Commons, please let us know. Send us an email with a link to the model. And the reason why we want that is so that we can collect a public set of links, right? We obviously have your models. You've sent them to us, right? But this way we have a public set of links so that we can easily point to them when people ask us for examples of things that were done in the course. We don't like to distribute the models you sent us because those were part of the class itself, right? We will try to put together a kind of rogues gallery, if you will, of the best models that we found, right? Not a rogues gallery at all. A Hall of Fame, let's put it that way, of the best models. And usually that gets written up in the Santa Fe newsletter, or the Complexity Explorer newsletter, sorry, at some point along the way. Okay? So thank you all for being here, and thanks for everything. As always, if you have a question, you can post it live on the YouTube chat. You can tweet at me at intro to ABM with the number 2, INTRO number 2 ABM. You can also email ABM at complexityexplorer.org, though I won't get those until next week, which is our final week. And you can always post a question on the forum. Those are all good ways to make an appearance on the YouTube office hours, right? So let's go through the questions that we got for the day. And by the reminder, for those of you watching, tweet or post your question near the beginning of the hour, just because of the fact that if I run out of questions, I may be hanging up by the time you actually post your question. Okay? So let's see this. Okay, here we go. Okay. So apparently some students were having trouble finding the assignments that they were assigned to review, right? And this is a little tricky. Basically, you have to basically click on the when you go back to where you turned in your assignment, right? There'll be some assignments that you can review there, and there's like a number that you can click on that basically shows it to you. And it should be tagged with like a paperclip type icon. Let me find out. Oh, it's not showing it for me because it claims it's already done. Let me see if I can log in as another user so you can see what it looks like. Okay. They have a test. There we go. Okay. Okay, hold on, I'm trying to get to it. Sorry, getting there. Oh, there's a way to do this, and I'm screwing up. Sorry. Is that the one I want? No. Is that the one I want? No. Okay. Anyway, so essentially, if you go, let me just bring this up so you can see what I'm looking at. Okay, sorry. I don't know why it's taking so long. Lovely air company. Okay, so let's see. this one. Let me just click through. Okay. So you should go back to this window, but hopefully it won't actually say the deadline is passed for this peer review because it hasn't. But real quickly, let me double check the dates, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. Yeah, October 1. So we still have a few more days, right? But on this window, you'll get the additional peer reviews, assignments you need to review. You should have also received an email at whatever location whatever email you used to sign up for the course with a link to this as well, right? So hopefully you all got those appropriately. Let's see if there's any other questions that kind of came up in this response. But those are where you should be able to find it. Now, in some cases, you may have trouble actually opening the files, right? So a lot of times it's in a zip file, right? And in those cases, you need to use some unzipping software. 7-zip is probably the most powerful of them, but most of your standard software will work to unzip the software first. So try that, see if that will help you, and see if that works out. Okay? Okay. So let's see. Oh, sorry. That was not the window I meant to show. I was clicking through on the wrong message. But so hopefully you got those through. Okay. Okay. So you should have seen your models come through. If you didn't, for whatever reason, let me know, and I will definitely we'll definitely look into it as quick as possible. So email us back if you had trouble finding your models, but they should all be up there. Okay. Adam had a question about GIS. Apparently, the shapefile he's been importing gets I can't talk today, and I'm having trouble operating my computer. Distorted, despite having tried multiple projections. He's asking what's the best projection you should use when generating the GIS shapefiles for import. So, this class, as much as I would love it to really go into detail about GIS, unfortunately, we don't really have time to do that, right? So, all I can really do is point you to some other sources. So, Adam, I would love, if you go to and type in NetLogo GIS extension, you'll get a lot of details about the different aspects of it. And there's even a tutorial, right? There's integrating GIS and NetLogo. There's a lot of help. So I would recommend looking at all those. I used to do a lot of work with GIS data, and I probably could have answered this question about 15 years ago. But as of right now, I've kind of gotten away from it, right? And so I don't know off the top of my head what the best, and I'm trying to pull up that exact question. So having any success with projected very low success with the listed geographic coordinate says, what is the best option for consistent success in importing shapefiles without distortion in the shapes? Yeah, so I unfortunately, I think your best way to approach that question, because that gets a little bit on the more technical side, would be to go to our old trusty resource, Stack Overflow, NetLogo, right? And look at and post the question there, right? Especially given how detailed that question is. I would just iterate through the different projections and see. I'm not sure why they're showing up distorted. That makes no sense to me, right? I mean, they should show up according to whatever the projection is. That's a pretty standard kind of thing, right? Like given a shapefile and given a projection, it should always consistently show up somewhat similar. So the only thing I can think of is if you're having troubles, Adam, with the fact that it's not actually the shapefile being projected on the drawing layer, but you're trying to project the shapefile onto the patches, and that's looking distorted, right? Which is another way to do it. And obviously, that's always going to be distorted, especially if you have a smaller world. Well, I can demonstrate that. Okay, so if this is, I don't know what, so it's hard to answer this question in the abstract because I don't know exactly what you mean by it's looking distorted, right? So let me bring up a file and let me show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to use the one that I also use in the class itself, which is the ticket sales model, right? because it uses both patches and the drawing layer to represent the system, right? So. Okay. So here we go. Got a trusty old Netlogger window, right? Let me turn my view off. Make this window big. Right. Okay. Right. Okay. So we'll go to the file models library. Go down to ABM textbook, and I think it's all the way down to chapter 8. Right there's the ticket sales example. Okay. So if you may or may not remember this, but this model, when it runs, it basically draws in from a shapefile the geographic coordinates of Manhattan, right? And then sets up a map in which all the little census districts of Manhattan are represented within the system. It's running really slow right now because my system's trying to do like 5 things at once, including streaming. And it's doing a pretty good job of streaming because it's only dropped about less than a percentage of the total frames it's sending. But as a result, it doesn't do as good a job of those. So here you go. In this model, right, the projection looks fine, right? The lines look fine. However, if I were to do something like try to map the shapefile onto the patches, right, so let's see. Let's see if I can get this code right. So I'm going to basically go in, and for every one of the patches that is in the census tract, I'm going to turn its color to yellow. Right, that's the name of the colors I have. Right, and that, what is that? Let's load patch data. So let's type load patch data in again. And what you'll see is that if I'm actually kind of using the data to actually in the patches as opposed to the drawing layer, it's going to look distorted because the patches are squares and they don't exactly match the natural boundaries of the drawing layers. This might take a little while to run, but essentially it's a discretization problem. It's one way to think of it, right there. So you see, it's kind of like jagged around the edges, and in this case, I'm basically, taking every. So I have this shape file that describes the geo IDs of match. There we go. So I have these shape files that describe the tracks, the census tracks. Right, let me load that up. So I have this shapefile that describes the census tracts, and what I'm doing in the code I just added is every time that there is a census tract that I'm trying to put a piece of population into, I color it yellow, right? And so if I map the shapefile of the census tracts to the patches, it's going to be distorted just because of the fact that there's not a one-to-one map. Like I can't take, like if you think about it, if I take like a circle and try and map it to a square, which is what the patches are, I'm going to get some distortion, right? So if that's your issue, then there's not much you can do about it, right? Like the underlying patches in Netlogger are squares. You just have to kind of do your best to deal with it. Now, one thing you can do, right? So if I destroy this world, right, and I make the patch size smaller, but I make the world bigger, right? And now I run setup. You'll notice that as I make patches smaller and the world's bigger, this is going to take a long time to run, so I may go on to the next question and just show you this later. The distortion goes away, right? So basically, the smaller the patches are, the less it's going to be visible from the naked eye that there's any kind of discretization going on in the system, right? In the end, you can never get away from it completely. At the very little, a pixel will take up some amount of space, but it may have, it may be a different way to do it. Okay, so hopefully that helps. Hopefully that helps, Adam. If you have additional questions, please let us know. Okay, so next question that's come up Oh, so not a question, but it's a good reminder. Apparently, a couple students have started to upload their assignment to Open ABM. So thank you very much for doing that. That's great. And as I said, we'll be passing those on to the Complexity Explorer admins, and they usually like to put together a little story about the papers that were put together. If you see that, I can show. Might as well. I'll show you this one. This is the one. It's one of the ones that what was it? It was Hamdi had put together about customers going to a restaurant. So it's there and it's up and it's loaded on the Conversations Net already, and so you can go and download their version right there. Okay, so cool. That's awesome, Hamdi. Thank you very much for being one of the first to take that plunge. Um, I did have another question. I had a former student who emailed and asked about being able to access previous material from the course. And I believe, and I have to check with the admins on this, but I believe the way it works is that while a current course is being run, it's hard to access the past materials, right? It's hard to access the material of the course. But once the course finishes, then you can access the material. It's basically, it goes into lockdown mode while another course is being run, right? But if you ever have any questions or concerns about that, if you can't access the material or running into any issues, please email admin@complexityexplorer.org. They should be able to help you out pretty quickly. Okay. And again, once this course ends, right, all the videos will still be up online. You can always, those links are permanent basically, unless I were to change the video, right, over the next couple of years, in which case, email us. We can probably get you the replacement link, right? But the website itself will be up and running, and you'll be able to access the content. The only thing that will be different is the forums aren't available when the course isn't running, right? Because of the way the system works right now. So finally, last question I have that came in today over the emails was that Carlos asked for the resource that you mentioned at the spread is used in exporting data from NetLogo into a GIS environment for analysis. So that's essentially, it's kind of what we were just talking about with Adam's question. The resource I would plan on going to is look at the GIS example in the GIS documentation on the NetLogo website, right? And specifically, what I was alluding to there was this store dataset command, right? Currently, unfortunately, this will only allow you to output raster data and not the drawing data, right? Unfortunately, but you can hopefully output it directly in that way, right? If that's useful, that would be the way you would do it, right? Like you would bring some GIS data into NetLogo, run your model, right, and then export the output values of the patches, right? And in reality, you can't really modify, like in any interesting way, the drawing layer because portions of the drawing layer can't interact, right? So it doesn't really make sense to have the drawing layer be able to be exported. Instead, what you want is for in an agent-based model to export the actual raster data, right? And that's in the store dataset command, right? So once you store it into that dataset, right, and we can look up the details about that particular command, right? Then you should be able to import it into other datas, right? So into a Esri, basically a standard Esri system, right? And there's a great tutorial. I do like this one called Turtles in Space. I've seen it before. That basically goes through how to use NetLogo with GIS data. Now, in this particular case, it looks like they're actually, the tutorial I haven't looked at in a little bit, it looks like it might be using an older version of NetLogo, but that's fine. It should be fairly easy to get it to work. And let's see. Yeah. And you see they leave the store data set to generate for future work as well. But store data set is what you want to do. That will store it in a standard raster data set and basically allows you to output it directly. Interesting. I know that there was some talk at some point of being able to store the turtle data set and the link data set as well. I don't know if that actually works. I haven't played around with that in a while. So if anyone listening knows one way or the other, that would be very helpful. But I know that for a long time it only did raster data sets. See, maybe there's a GitHub post about it, so maybe that'll explain it. So this is actually just about storing the patch data set. So that should work no matter what. Let's see. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the GIS extension now supports. Let's look at that link dataset command. Supports a new line vector dataset from the link that given the endpoints of the line location. Huh. It seems like that's what you want to be. I guess you just have to write out that data. Maybe not. Maybe the problem is actually getting that into shapefile format. Load. You can definitely load. Yeah. And this currently says that it only works for raster data sets. So I don't know. If someone has experience with storing either line or point data sets from that logo, that would be useful. But the store data set is the short and simple answer to Carlos's questions. Okay. One last comment there. I believe we now have gotten all the assignments into the system. So there were a couple of issues with some of the assignments not being entered correctly. I think they're all done. Everyone should be receiving a grade, but if you're having any trouble with getting your final assignment into the system, or you don't think it got in or whatever, you should be able to go to your progress page and it should be able to show a check mark next to it. So hopefully that helps. Okay. Well, I think that is it in terms of the questions that were taught. Ooh, that's really, I should turn that off because that's really meta right there. Okay. So I think that is it for the questions we're talking about today. If there are any other questions, from anybody watching, you have a few minutes to pipe up before I shut down the stream. But kind of the big goal for this week, right, is to wrap up the peer reviews. Sorry, wow, I am just not firing fast today. Wrap up the peer reviews, and also, just kind of finish up any tests that you have, right? We got one last week to go next week. That'll be our last week to I leave that week on just to finish up the test. And we'll have one more office hour, and I promise it'll be better than this one because I feel like I've just been flustered all over this office hour today. But, sometimes those things happen, so I apologize. If there's any questions, please let me know. Please, get those peer reviews done. You can do more than 3 if you want, right? There's never any problems with that. And, if you're having trouble anywhere down the line, shoot me an email, abm@complexlyexplorer.org, intro to ABM on Twitter, INTRO2ABM. Post on the forum, post a message in the YouTube blog. One of those different ways, you'll be able to get a hold of us. Myra does have a question. You follow some scientific journals, in particular of agent-based modeling, if not logo. I would like to publish my work as soon as I improve it. Yeah, I mean, there's no problem publishing. Agent-based modeling has come a long way in terms of scientific acceptance, and it's always been accepted in some fields, like ecology, for instance, population ecology, especially, right? But in different fields, it's had different amounts of acceptance over the years. But I think it's really coming of age in many ways. And of course, there are journals that are basically just focused on agent-based modeling. So JAS, the Journal of Artificial Societies and Social Simulation, is essentially a journal that just publishes ABM, and it's an open access journal. Anyone can go check it out. I highly recommend doing that. And if you want to kind of get some feedback before you send it off to a journal, I highly recommend one of the conferences. The CSS conference is going on right now in Santa Fe, the Computational Social Science Conference. Might have wrapped up yesterday, or it's going on at some point soon. So that's a good one. I think I getting that one right. Just want to make sure I'm not confusing multiple conferences. Yeah, computational. Yeah, CSS 2018. I think it was going on right now. Let me pull this up. I'll show it to you. So this would be a good way, October 25th. Oh, sorry. No, it's not for another month. Huh. I swear I saw someone saying they were presenting for it. It's coming up in a little bit. Murdy Glesic from SFI and Lee Tetzfatzian from Iowa State will be presenting. I think it'll be as keynotes, but there'll be a number of other papers as well. I think that's a great way to kind of, get into presenting some of the work that's going on and kind of seeing what's going on out there, right? And if you never made it to it, the ESSA conference, the European Social Simulation Association conference, is another great conference. And I don't know if I've been. Oh, I've been to one. I've been to one. There was a World Congress on Social Simulation that was held for a while. But these conferences are all, even though it has the words social simulation, they're generally encouraging of work in the broader realm of agent-based modeling, right? So if you can tie it to social science at all, I think they'd be interested in seeing what's going on. Okay. So definitely keep forward with that. I highly encourage you. And if you do get it published, let us know. That's the other thing, right? Send us a link. We always like to see what has come out. Okay. So thanks everyone. Take care, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye.